Hooked on heroin and condemned to a life of addiction, many coastal women chained to the momentary high of a fix regret the moment things went out of hand. They've nowhere to turn to for help, and so they live a life of misery and eternal regret. But as we find out, the lucky few get a shot at the Last Chance Salon in Mombasa. Our health reporter, Eunice Omolo, visited the place of manicure, pedicure, and addiction cure.
In the alleys and back streets of this coastal gem live thousands resigned to the gloomy life of drug addiction.
That man was like, okay, he knew he was using me, but his words, it was like he was helping me. So rather than going out and struggle on the road and the streets with the cold, I'd rather be with the drug baron so he could use me when he wants and he could give me heroin. So I stayed with that man for 5 years.
If we say this is the targeted area and we are not maybe focusing on it, us as a community, we are working on the demand reduction. And we've been having a lot of voices because heroin is not planted in Kenya.
According to the World Health Organization, almost 11 million people inject drugs globally, and 2 out of every 10 people who inject drugs are women. A new strategy is luring women addicts to seek the much-needed rehabilitation and other health services. And that strategy is in the form of a salon, which also doubles up as an outreach center.
They used to wait for us to reach out to them at their hotspot, which at times is hard. So that is why I came up with the idea of the beauty corner. So far we've seen a bigger uptake of services because they're not only coming there to beautify themselves, but as they come, we also encourage them to access clinical services.
34-year-old Elizabeth Sarah is on methadone treatment as well and has been coming to the outreach center for more than 3 years now in her quest to break the shackles for addiction.
Siku nyingi tulikuwa tukikuja tunapata services zingine, lakini services za urembo ilikuwa hakuna. So ni kitu ambacho ni kipya kwa macho yangu. Kwa sababu kama huyu ndio alikuwa pia wangu, ndio alikuwa akinifuata kule maeneo. Yeye mwenyewe hata saizi akiniangalia, unaona anaweza shika kichwa changu. Lakini ilikuwa hawezi kushika hichi kichwa, hizi nywele haziangaliki.
Mimi nilivutiwa na waraibu kulingana na ukiangalia pale chini, kama si dadako basi ni rafiki yako, ni mtu wako wa karibu. Ukiangalia wale wanaokwenda kule chini wengi pia educate alikuwa ni wanaume.
At the salon and away from the domineering relationships, the women are free and can easily access these services without fear.
Most of them, they are taken like prostitute or they are taken like very low people in our society. So we are trying to raise that alarm and being able to say these are members of the community.
With every new coat of polish on these women, every brush stroke through their hair, they get renewed hope of cleaning up their past and stepping out refreshed and renewed. Eunice Omolo, NTV, Mombasa County.
So this morning we are looking at the issue of addiction and the impact of COVID-19. And with me is an array of guests and experts to help us through this journey. We've got with me here in the studio Susan Gitao, who is an addiction coach. We also have in our 5th floor newsroom studio, Anne Madhu, who is a recovery coach. Herself has been 15 years sober after a journey of alcohol addiction. In Mombasa, we will be joined by Taib Abdul, who will also be telling us about the situation at the coast. He's the director of the Reach Out Rehab Center in Mombasa. We also have via Zoom, Julie Gidhiri, who is a psychosexual therapist, who will be joining us shortly. We also will be speaking to 2 people who are, addicts themselves. We'll just give them one name to protect their identities, and we're speaking to them on phone again because we want them to remain anonymous. The first one is Matthew, who is a sex addict, who will be speaking to us about his experiences. We'll also be speaking to Titus, who is a gambling addict. And also, all the way in Kampala, Uganda, Bill Bekunda, who is the founder of a Safe Place Rehab Center, will be joining us. And we'll be joined by regular correspondents in Dar es Salaam. Tulanana Bohela will be joining us via Skype. And in Kampala, our NTV Uganda correspondent, Walter Moseje, will also be live with us. Now, I want to start in Mombasa because that's where we ended that story. To you, Taib, Assalamu alaikum. I'm not sure I can hear you here, but as long as you can hear me, we're good to go.
Wa alaikum salam.
Oh, thank you
Yes,
very much.
yes.
Much better now. Now,
Yeah.
that was a story of hope for people in Mombasa.
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of the state of addiction at the coast? We talk about plenty of addiction cases at the Mombasa, but what's the situation like today?
No, today we say we are very thankful for what we have. I think you've mentioned it very well. Because of many years of implementation and reaching out to people, we have seen the hope at the end of the tunnel, because at least there are programs that are on the ground. When we started, we didn't have this program, but at least now we have the treatment centers, we have the outreach program, we have the harm reduction program, we have the medically assisted therapy. I think there are options, the array of services that are being offered within the coastal region. To be specific, in Mombasa, we have the methadone clinic, that is the medically assisted therapy, which has been decentralized to different sub-counties, and also the treatment centers, and also the outpatient program, where people can be able to come in through the drop-in centers and being able to be served within the addiction problem.
What about the numbers of people who are addicted to various substances or various things? How is it looking today?
Yeah, within the coastal region, we are saying we have within different sub-counties that are widely hit, like in Mombasa, Kilifi, Lamu, and Kwale. Within Mombasa, we are seeing what we have seen, what we have reached within the program is an estimate of 5,000 people who use drugs within Mombasa County. When you check it on the coastal region, we are looking at almost 50,000 people who use drugs. And this has been an estimate from the National Campaign Against Drug Abuse, which ranged at 50,000 to 100,000 within the coastal region. But here in Mombasa, we have managed to be able to reach to 5,000 people over the period of years that we have been able to implement. And the ones that we have been able to channel them through the program of rehabilitation is 1,200 to be able to pass through the inpatient program. And those who are currently reached out within our outreach program is a number of 2,500 people that are currently on our cohort.
Okay, we'll get into the detail of what exactly you do there, but let me just go around by various other guests. Let me start with you, Susan, here with me in the studio. Good morning again. Welcome to your world.
Morning to you.
Now, the state of addiction, first of all. What are the numbers look like? What is the trend at the moment, generally, from your own experience?
From where I sit, the numbers right now, maybe Nakada can give us better exact numbers, but we are aware that with the COVID-19, things have changed drastically. Reason being that with the COVID, there's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of people not able to interact with their programs that they had because of the control of movement. Therefore, I'm finding most of my clients tending to relapse or go back to drugs because of the nature of there are no systems anymore. Although the systems are coming back slowly, what we noticed as addiction professionals was we were not recognized as essential services. Yet we realized we were, because a lot of things came up when the issue of COVID came in as far as alcohol was concerned, whereby rumors started going around that alcohol is treatment for COVID. And therefore, even people who had sobered up felt I needed to take care of myself, and they started drinking alcohol. So the numbers right now, I think the people who can give us the exact numbers are Nakada. But from my outfit or from Elewa Ulevi, the numbers we have had for people who are using alcohol and drugs goes up to 10,000. And this is within Kiambu County.
Okay.
Yes.
Julie Githiri, thank you for joining us and welcome to your world. Again, from where you sit, I know you mainly handle psychosexual matters, but what's the trend as far as that is concerned? Julie, you can hear me?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll repeat the question. I can ask you to lean back a little bit, or can you hear me from here? Can you hear me now?
Very, very faintly.
Very faintly. I will be very loud and I'll keep my question short.
Now I can hear you.
What is the trend of addiction as far as your area of profession is concerned in Kenya?
Okay, so I'm a psychosexual therapist, but I also do general psychotherapy work. So when we're looking at trends and around addiction, it varies from drugs to alcohol and to sex addiction, with the majority being more around sexual addiction and alcohol that I tend to see.
Okay.
And it tends to be more within men, and I tend to see a lot of couples, so within the couple unit.
And is a trend? Is it going up? Is it steady? Is it getting better?
I think maybe I wouldn't necessarily say it's going up. Maybe more people are becoming more aware and are reaching out for services. I think in this time of COVID, yes, we're definitely seeing spikes in addiction because people are isolated, they're on their own for large periods of time. But there's more of an awareness and a degree of normalization of addiction. So people are reaching out more and wanting to see what services they can have access to and are available to them.
Okay. Bill Bekunda in Kampala, welcome to your world. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, give me a sense of what you're dealing with in Uganda as far as addiction is concerned. What is the trend? What are the numbers? Is it on the upward rise or?
Yes, the numbers in Uganda are on an upward rise. As you know, Uganda has been known for being one of the highest consumers of alcohol in the world. That has been, in the journals and everywhere. So alcohol is actually a very big problem in our country, especially those who take the cheaper drinks. I'm a recovery coach right now, but my history is an alcoholic. So I'm an alcoholic in long-term recovery, although now I am a recovery coach at Safe Places Uganda Treatment Center. Now, what is happening is, I think the last statistics we have are that about 1 in every 4 people in Uganda has got a problem with a psychoactive substance per se. Then there are the other things that we've talked about. There are addictions to work, there are addictions to activities, to routines, to sex, pornography, masturbation, and these are growing very fast, especially amongst the young people. I work a lot with young people because apart from being a recovery coach, I also do work with an organization I started called Health Youth Lifestyle Options, which is a behavioral health development organization. And we have seen that problems of gambling, problems of masturbation and sex, problems of all those are beginning to crop up amongst children and at a much younger age. So the problem here in Uganda is something that needs a lot of attention to right now.
Okay, Bill, we'll be with you shortly for more. Let me turn to you, Anne Madhu. Good morning and welcome to your world.
Thank you.
Now, you yourself are in long-term recovery. You're a recovery coach yourself.
Yes.
Let me take you 15 years back when you had this problem. What kicked it off?
Actually, thank you for having me. That's the first thing. And I'm here to give people hope that recovery is possible. Addiction, one, is a shame-based disease, both in recovery and even in active addiction. So I started by having a drink from my dad at a very tender age when I was only 10. And my dad used to keep alcohol in the house, and that's where we started. And I can see this happening a lot now with the COVID, because a lot of people are drinking in the house, and actually children getting exposed to alcoholic drinks at a very tender age, and also other substances.
And so you started the habit quite young. How bad did it get?
Addiction is progressive, and I believe it's a progressive disease, and I believe Susan will talk about the stages. But I started as an experimenter, having a drink from my dad. I never expected it to mess up my life later on because my dad was an alcoholic as well. So I didn't expect anything wrong with having a sip here and there. Until now, after my dad died, I drank a lot. I started now sneaking alcohol into school, actually to escape from the reality of his death. I was very close to my dad. And then I joined Gandu Girls in 1977, and that's the same year my dad died. So never got to mourn my dad, never got any therapy, loss and grief. And I went back to school, a very shattered girl, and I started now actually sneaking alcohol into school. Affected my education, I never passed my exams. Later on, I joined Kenya Polytechnic for a diploma course in IM, and we used to get a boom of 500, and then now my drinking got worse because 500 was a lot of money in 1981, and actually a beer was going for 3 shillings and 50 cents, the same thing as a packet of cigarettes, because I started smoking when I was about 10, still from my dad. And I started missing school on Fridays and Mondays. Fridays to go and drink, and Mondays to nurse the hangover. Again, I messed up my education. I enrolled for Miss Kenya in 1982. I came second, and I had a lot of sponsors, a lot of money, and a lot of exposure at a very tender age. And that is where the downward spiral now started. So I didn't pass my exams in college, but since I was a government-sponsored student, I had to work for the government. I was posted to a school in Nanyuki, where I worked for 3 years. Again, my drinking didn't get any better. So I got my first baby then and fell out with my boyfriend. That was another big blow because we have many factors along the way that contribute to the progress of the addiction.
So I want to come and continue with that journey in a moment. But just for people to get a sense of what addiction is. Addiction is when the body or mind badly wants or needs something in order to work right. As simple as it sounds, the technicality of how the human brain works as a reaction to the substance or behavior is complex in itself. Well, here's a clip breaking it down into simple language.
What is addiction? It's also called a substance use disorder. Over 20 million people nationwide suffer from addiction. 1 in 7 people will experience addiction at some point in their life. Scientists first began to understand addiction as a brain disorder back in the 1950s. Doctors Olds and Milner, in laboratory studies of rats, found the parts of the brain affected by addiction. But then in 1994, Drs. Volkoff and Shelbert, top neuroscientists, ran PET scans of the brain that showed the effects of substance use disorders. And like other diseases, these scans showed it affected tissue function. So there are 2 main parts of the brain affected by drug use, the limbic system and the cortex. The limbic system, located deep within the brain, is responsible for our basic survival instincts. So when you do essential things to stay alive, like eat, drink, find shelter, build relationships, or care for your young, your brain reinforces behaviors that cause the release of dopamine from this region. That reward for surviving is also transmitted to the amygdala and hippocampus, which records a memory of that feeling, so we seek it again. This is our survival hardwiring. Addiction also affects this area, up here. That's the prefrontal cortex, which is what separates us from other animals. And this is where decision-making and impulse control live. When drugs or alcohol are used, they activate the very same dopamine process in the survival center. And when use is repeated, that substance can hijack that part of the brain. This hijacker changes the brain and weakens this system to make it believe that the primary need for survival is the drug. In hijacking the brain, it can usurp those primary motivations: food, water, shelter, relationships, and protecting our young. And the hijacker needs more and more of the substance to activate the same level of reward or feeling of pleasure, causing the brain tissue to become increasingly damaged with continued drug use. So why don't all people who use alcohol or drugs become addicted? There are factors that contribute to the development of a substance use disorder. They include individual factors like your genes, your age of exposure, and then environmental factors like drug availability. But there is good news. Addiction is preventable. Key factors that aid in preventing addiction can be categorized into 2 parts: risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors range from parental involvement, programs that improve self-control, limiting availability, and increasing attachment to your community. Another key element in preventing substance use disorders is to delay when use begins. Put simply, prevention is about delaying the onset of first use. In the adolescent brain, where brain tissue is more vulnerable, the hijacker is more prone to weaken the brain and plant itself as a disease. Those with substance use disorders commonly initiate first use much earlier, between 12 and 18 years old, which increases the likelihood of the hijacker taking hold. But if the hijacker does take hold, addiction is treatable. Advancements have been made in assessments, treatment programs, recovery supports, and medications to treat addiction. Brain scans show that once in recovery, the tissue in the limbic system and cortex can get better. With your help, we can expand these innovations to help millions of individuals and families and ensure that addiction is treated as the medical issue that it is. Together, we can solve this.
Okay, that's addiction for you. Now, Susan, you're an addiction coach. Anne mentioned about starting her journey of alcohol abuse as a young child. How common is that? And I think Bill also mentioned the same kind of examples in Uganda.
In Kenya, it's quite common. We know most of us are drinking at home now, and our children learn by seeing, modeling. So they do what you're doing. They don't do what you're saying. So we are realizing that we are bad role models as parents, as leaders, as opinion givers. So we have no moral authority of telling somebody not to drink or drug when we, who are supposedly older or well-informed, are doing the same. So we are realizing what Anne was talking about is progression. Addiction is process. She was exposed to it at the age of 10. So I don't think by then even the father knew what he was doing, but something triggered in her. Then when we talk of environmental, is whereby now she loses the father. She doesn't know how to cope about it. Nobody cares about it. So she learns how to cope with that loss of her father. So as she's growing up and she's being exposed to this beauty pageant, a lot of money, a lot of people. So the environment is still really exposing her to the substances. So the progression goes up. So she said it was experimental first. Now it became social. It went to habitual. Then from habitual, it went to she needs it every day. So that becomes compulsive. And that's where now she got the disease. So it didn't catch her the first day. It caught up with her after a few years of use. So with our country, the way we are exposing young children before their brains are fully developed, you realize if you start early before your brain is fully developed, which we are told it develops fully at 25 years of age, your chances of becoming a substance user or someone with an addiction are higher than when we delay you. So you use it at a later age. By then, your brain has developed well, and therefore it can make better decisions and cannot catch the disease itself.
Okay, Susan, now let me move over to Kampala. Bill, again, sticking with children, you mentioned people beginning their addictions at a very early age. How early and why? What are the factors for children?
So many things. Today's parent is very busy hustling, that's the tag. And we are a very young population. You see that 78% of Ugandan population is youth. So these are people who have just got into the system. They have children. They don't have that much time to take care of them because, you know, the economy is bad. We need to work hard to make ends meet. And so parents are not finding enough time to bond, to give their children boundaries and to monitor them because there are so many pressures. Now, when you talk about the current situation of COVID-19, now everyone plus that, there are no jobs. So you're worried about what you're going to eat or how you're going to survive after this, or if you're going to retain your job, or all those things that is happening currently. But the trends have been growing because, number one, there's also, another thing is there is exposure. We have the internet. We have, when you have a phone, when you have a tablet, you can access pornography, you can access all kinds of information, and the parents are buying these gadgets for their children. They're not monitoring them. They're not censoring. Basically, you see that, would say that most of these are happening because we are not paying attention to the problem. And, you know, children are inquisitive. They want to know what is next. They want to move with trends. Whatever seems to be a trend, the celebrities we have today, it's unbelievable. The ones who quarrel, the ones who fight, the ones who promiscuous, the ones who do all the crazy things are the people that are being given attention to. They are the role models for these young children. They are the people we find on the gadgets. I mean, they're with the likes, YouTube and everywhere. So they want to follow what is happening. So when you combine the lack of bonding, boundaries and monitoring with the exposure that they have, even on television, I've watched things on TV that I don't want young people to watch. With all these things put together, children as old as 6, 7, 8 years old are being involved in things you would not believe or you wouldn't even want to talk about.
Okay. Bill, thanks for that. Let me move over to Taib in Mombasa. Again, on the theme of children, what's the situation in terms of children and addiction in the coastal region?
Here, the age group has gone down. We have been looking into the age of 18 to 25, but now the age group has gone down at the age of 14 to 18. This is because what my colleagues has mentioned here, but the availability of drugs that are available, the curiosity of this age to be able to know, to want to know what these drugs are all about. The cost of the drugs, like bang, is at 10 shillings. So it's easy. Our children, our youth are being given money. They have money at their custody. They can buy anytime. Oh. And this has also led into the young people now going into heroin. At the age of 14, 15, they're using heroin. And this, if you reflect back and engage into them during the session of addiction, you'll realize they've been using bang at the age of 10, like what Anna's mentioned, alcohol. Then they have graduated into other drugs like cat, alcohol. Then eventually they are also linked into heroin. And this is because of the peer pressure, the availability of heroin within the coastal region. And that is what the graduation will go out to, now using heroin. And we have seen at the age of 16 now injecting heroin. 14, 15, 16 injecting heroin. This is very sad situation down here in coastal region.
Okay, Taib, thank you. And before I continue, I've got a question here for you, Susan, which has just come in from a viewer. Mm-hmm. He's called Juma Brian, and he says, I am struggling with my addiction, but I got nowhere to turn to seek for help. Given the crisis the country is facing, and to make matters worse, I was temporarily laid off my job, making it even more stressful and easier to turn to my vice as a way of relieving stress. What words do you have for Juma this morning?
Maybe I'll tell Juma to look out for addiction professionals. They are there. Most of them are online. And what will happen is that he needs somebody to see him personally, like the way I'm seated here with you. Unlike the other counseling where you can do the virtual counseling, addiction is a bit more complex because we do some things we call screening, assessments, toxicology, just to know where he is at and then help him deal with what is going on. What he's bringing out, which is so true, with the COVID, anxiety is more, depression is more, a lack of money is more, so he's more stressed than he was before, and therefore he doesn't have a better coping skill. So he's going to his old ways or how he has known how to cope before, which is by using substances, which does not make this better. It only makes it worse and worse and worse. So probably by the time we are living here with Anne, we can give out our numbers and he can reach out to any one of us so that we can be able to help him through that process of recovery because it's a long process. Okay. It's not a small process.
All right. Bill, again, can you help us here a little bit to our brother Juma, who is struggling and COVID doesn't help? What tips might you have for him?
Yes, addiction, I'll give from my experience first, and then I'll get to you. You cannot do it alone. Nobody can manage.
Sorry, Bill, I can't hear you for a moment. Let me, one moment as I try to, okay. Yeah, please continue.
Yes, hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes, I was saying that you cannot do it alone. When you have a problem, you need help. Usually, in my case, me as an addict, the help I needed, I wanted it on my own terms. I wanted to stop my drinking and smoking, but I wanted to do it my way. When you need help, which means it comes from the outside in. Now, if you don't get help from the outside, you will not be able to do it. So one, there are recovery groups, but unfortunately during this COVID-19 time, we are not able to meet and congregate. It's against the law, and it's also dangerous for our health. So, but then we also have these meetings which are on online, on the internet, and you can get onto one of them. But also there are people around your area that you can actually communicate with and try to find a solution. If you cannot manage to control yourself, it is best that you get into a treatment center. With a treatment center, there is a challenge of affordability and things of that nature, but at least you try. In Uganda, we do have a place, a national referral hospital, which does handle these cases, people who cannot afford to be in treatment. But the best way is to talk to a professional, get an assessment, let them tell you what is it that you need to do. Do you need to be in an inpatient program? Can you join a group? But you have to do something about it. On your own, you cannot beat the addiction.
And Bill, just briefly, what is your own journey, just briefly, with alcohol?
My journey begins when I was turning 15, joining secondary school here in Uganda. And I was lured by my friends who simply said, come on, I used to lecture them about drinking, some of them, drinking, smoking, escaping from school. And so it was entirely peer pressure. And some of them said, let's go together, you just see what we are doing. I went along with them, the fear and everything. I tested it. I lost the fear. I became courageous. I felt I was more interesting. And that was it. I started. When I started, by the time I was finishing my A-levels, I was realizing something is different about me because I was not able to control myself even by that time. By the time I was turning 18, 19, I couldn't control myself. When I would go to drink, I would have the intention of taking enough and get back home in time. But I would always come back the next day, 3 days later. I was always in trouble, and I was always asking myself, why do some people, manage to control themselves and I can't? Then I got into university, and it was all a mess. I was in the Soviet Union in Ukraine, where alcoholics are kind of accepted. It's not like in Uganda where, you're called names and you're like a Trump or something. And then when I came back to Uganda, people saw my behaviors were really not the best for community. My mom decided, no, I'm going to take this boy into rehabilitation. And I went into treatment. That was in the year 2004 for a 90-day treatment. And I started my recovery journey since then. Okay,
you've been sober since?
Yes. Sorry?
You've been sober since?
No, I had a relapse. I had a relapse in 2010, December, because I decided, about 2009 when I got married, I felt, by that time I'm confident, I know everything, and I started a bar, which was the #1 mistake that I made. I mean, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I knew it, but I thought that a bar would make me money because I wanted to build it into a hotel. And again, from the advice of others, if you want to build a hotel, start with the bar. It will manage all these running costs around. People have done it, but I'm yet to hear of an alcoholic that has done it. So when I got into that, I served in that bar for almost a period of a whole year and a half without a problem. Until one day I was tempted. There's always a turning point. And for the next 3 years, I was struggling to get back on my feet because I lost everything I had put in. I lost everything that I had worked for. I lost my reputation. I lost my friends. I even lost my home for a while because I couldn't stay at home and my wife couldn't allow that mess to be in the house. We have a child to look after and I'm not another child to be to be grown. And that actually helped me to get back into my recovery.
Oh, okay. Bill, thank you so much for that. That's really useful. I'll come back to you.
Yes.
But let me go back to Anne in a moment. Anne, where did you eventually get help for your addiction, or how?
Okay, I got help in 2005. That's when I checked into a rehabilitation center. After losing 3 jobs, eventually I lost My first husband died from alcoholism. After some time, I later got married. I went to Germany and got married to a German who was an alcoholic who later died. And then I lost everything that I had. I started selling my household stuff. I lost my children. My mom actually took them away from me because I was an absent mother. I was never there. And my children were suffering, so my mom took the children and decided to educate to educate them. So actually, my mom stopped being a grandmother and became a mother to my children, and I'm very, very grateful for her. My mom never gave up on me. She kept on praying for me, hoping that one day I'll become a better person. But then after losing everything that I had and the jobs and the money, I now changed to second-generation alcoholic drinks. So after my second husband died, because now I had no money. So then again, the second-generation alcoholic drinks became a bit too expensive.
What do you mean by second-generation alcoholic drinks?
Easy akina naps and sapphire. These cheap spirits.
So you downgraded from, I don't know, beer or whatever it was?
Yes, plus vodka and lime. You know, when you have money, you take good stuff. Vodka and lime on the rocks, gin and tonic, Campari, Maya's rum. So you come from that, and actually now start going down. And then eventually now I start taking the cheap liquor. And I used to go to the market and sit outside the wines and spirits shop. So you can imagine, from being a beauty queen, actually bringing the beauty queen crown actually to these cheap outlets. And then later on that became too expensive for me, and I drifted now to drinking changa. I used to drink with my brother. He was my buddy. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago. So my wake-up call came when I actually drank jet fuel. So there was a police raid in our Changaden, and actually my brother told me ati kuna base ingine, kuna kitu ingine. Sasa hiyo hujawahi test, lakini tuende tujaribu. So tukaenda, and then he told me hapa ni kupiga flash juu ya police. So actually tukaeka kila mtu glass mbili.
Of jet fuel?
Of jet fuel. So when I sipped, I asked my brother, hii ni nini sasa ina taste kama petroli? Akaniambia piga flash ukalewe mbele. And I'm telling you, after those 2 glasses, by the time I got home, I felt like I was flying. Actually, I've never taken something so bad like that. I blacked out for about 48 hours. And actually, when I woke up, I started vomiting water that was blood-stained. I had actually gone to...
Did this tell you this has got to stop now?
Yeah, because actually before that time, I'd gone to church. I wanted to stop, but I could not be able to stop. So when I went to church, actually they threw me out. Ati wewe ondoa ilevi yako hapa. And I wanted to talk to the pastor and niombe hii ulevi ishe. Nobody wants to be an addict. We chose to drink, but we did not choose to become alcoholics and drug addicts. So I wanted the pastor to pray for me, at least Mungu ashuke and niokoe. So I was thrown out. And that's the first time I attempted suicide. I attempted suicide 3 times because I felt so useless, so worthless in life. I just wanted to die. So this time when I vomited blood, I saw death. So I knelt down and I told God, I made an appointment with you 3 times and you refused to take me. This time it's me who is refusing. Now I need help. So there's a friend of mine who had come, who had done an intervention. He left his number, just like Brian was asking what can be done. Someone came to me, to the Changaden, sat with me, told me about treatment and rehabilitation, left his number. So this time round, when I saw death, I took the number, I went and borrowed a phone, because sikuwa na simu, nilikuwa natembeaga na SIM card, simu nilikuwa nishauza. So I called this guy and said, now I surrender, kindly come to me for me and take me to rehab. Okay. And that's how I ended up in the rehab.
Okay, and years later, this is where you're at today, helping us help those who are struggling with this issue. I'll come back to you, Anne, in a moment. But I'm also joined on the phone now by Matthew. Matthew, good morning and welcome to Your World.
Good morning, and thanks for having me this morning. And so I've been following the discussion, and it's been quite enlightening. And so I'll just share about my story, if you'll allow me. And of course, it's one of hope. I think that's the recurring theme, that there is hope for those who are addicted to sex, though it didn't start that way. Like someone previously shared, I was exposed to sex at a very, very early age. And and then also to pornography at a neighbor's house. But the addiction didn't start until later and escalated when I was in university.
Yes, Matthew, just help me understand this. We know, or we can imagine, what alcohol addiction is, drug addiction is. What exactly is sex addiction?
So sex addiction for me is basically, binging on pornography, engaging in compulsive and, sexual behavior, risky sexual behavior, being very, very promiscuous and not being able to stop.
How did this affect your life?
It affected my life in many ways. One of the worst ways, of course, is that I got kicked out of school in university. It also became my main coping mechanism. So I was not able to relate well with people. I was not able to connect to people. So I was very isolated. I actually destroyed a lot of the relationships that I had with friends, with family, with people who I was dating, because I had this secret that I was keeping. I almost lived like a double life, where I was one person, and then, when I was acting out and doing my addictive behaviors, I was a different person.
Okay, Matthew, stay on the line for a moment. I just want to turn to Julie Githiri, who is a therapist, psychosexual therapist. Now, Julie, just listening to Matthew there, people sometimes don't understand or don't know how serious sex addiction can be, but it looks like it can be quite destructive.
Correct. It can cause different kinds of breakdowns within relationships, because we have to look at it as in it affects 5 main areas. It affects the biology, which you put the video on earlier to describe the dopamine impact that it has on the brain. It affects the emotional, so it impacts and leaves somebody feeling ashamed and embarrassed of their behavior. It has a relational impact, so the breakdown of relationships, maybe interaction with children, where this feeling disenfranchised from families and community. There's going to be the social component, so maybe feeling isolated, work, relationships break down, and expectations then can't be met. And then there's the cultural, so the values and the sort of moral compass that we all hold to. So when we look at those areas of oneself being the sort of internal difficulties that somebody would have, all of those things will be impacted by an addiction. So when we think about even one of those areas breaking down, sort of no community, breakdown in a relationship, dealing with shame, and of course the impact of dopamine on the brain, all of that will cause different challenges within a person.
And if I can just chip in, at what point does it cross over from a love for sex into you're addicted?
It's when you realize that it's impacting your life in a negative way, because it's very difficult to say sex addiction, and that title in itself wouldn't necessarily be used by everybody. If we look at it more as hypersexuality, because then we take away the negative of the use addiction, it being an addict, that in itself comes with different stigmas and negative connotations. But if it's call it hypersexuality, which is how it's recognized in the American DSM classification, it looks like somebody is hyperly sexual. And when that hypersexuality then impacts on somebody's ability to maintain routine, relationships, work, then it becomes a problem. Somebody could be hypersexual and be able to function normally. It doesn't impact on their work, on their self-being negatively. But when it starts to do that, that's when it becomes a problem.
Okay, now we're in COVID-19 season, which makes life difficult in all areas. What does this mean for people who predisposed to sex addiction, or who are living with this issue?
It may escalate because, number one, if we look at the social arm of the model, it's broken. That they may be feeling more isolated. They may be feeling increased feelings of shame and embarrassment because they're unable to find maybe privacy within their space, maybe if they're within a family. But if somebody's on their own, they're feeling isolated and they've got no outlet. So when we think about sex addiction or hypersexuality, it's about self-soothing. It's about trying to get the body to a place of calm. And sometimes addictions manage or increase a feeling of anxiety. So if somebody's feeling anxious because of COVID, fear of illness, fear of death, and all sorts of insecurities that someone might be having, their desire is to self-soothe. And that can be met through having increased levels of dopamine and then being able to reduce anxiety through use of maybe pornography and physical stimulation.
And so, from your experience and people you see, what are the causes? What leads? I mean, Matthew just shared his own, how it all started, but what are the causes? What leads people on this journey?
Okay, when I work psychodynamically, so I'm a psychotherapist. So there could be three, I'd sort of focus on three main causes, which could be opportunity and trauma, or opportunity and attachment. So we look at how maybe somebody has had an early traumatic experience that they then, like the other person that you just spoke about, she talked about having exposure to alcohol from an early age, and then she went on to talk about the death of her father. So those could be unresolved early trauma, which then get re-triggered when you experience a later trauma.
Okay.
So if somebody has experienced trauma, that could be one area. It could be attachment, not having maybe established or feeling more anxiously attached to the initial primary caregivers, which causes the more sort of predisposed to having addictions later on.
Okay, Jolie, thank you for a moment. Now, Matthew, if you're still with us on the line, why did you decide to seek for help?
Well, eventually my disease to what we call the malignant stage, where, I was really, my life was completely out of control. I was almost always, I hated myself. I was almost always angry, isolated, and even at times suicidal. And to add this problem, of course, there's a lot of shame and, as she mentioned, misconceptions. So in some areas or circles, it was almost acceptable what I was doing, but I knew that there was a problem. And eventually what prompted me, of course, is that, I was on the verge of losing everything because it was affecting my work, it was affecting my relationships. So I tried a lot of different approaches. I tried going to, the religious route. It didn't work for me. I also sought therapy that didn't work at the time. Maybe I wasn't ready to accept that I had a problem. But eventually, I found a fellowship called Sexaholics Anonymous that is actually modeled around Alcoholics Anonymous. And that is what, has helped me.
So Matthew,
sobriety. Yeah.
Where are you at today?
Yes. So where I'm at today, and as I said, it's definitely a story of hope, is that I'm able to, to handle life situations without resorting to addiction. I'm able to, just accept things, accept life on life terms. And in any case, a lot of my relationships and joy in life has been restored, which I think was what I had lost during those years. So I'm on a completely different plane. I'd say I look at life in a very positive way, and of course this has truly changed the way I live. And of course it's a joy to help others who have the same problem, who want to use this fellowship to recover, and those are the things that I engage in.
Okay, Matthew, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning and for sharing your story with us. Have a good day and stay safe. Now, Julie, just before you go, any tips for people who may be experiencing or think they're experiencing sex addiction?
I think if somebody is already having that thought and has seen an increased use of pornography, then they're already acknowledging that there's a problem. And what they need to think about doing is reaching out to a qualified, and I stress that it's a qualified therapist, somebody who is specialized in this area, because if they're working with somebody who isn't specialized in addiction, then they may feel increased shame and embarrassment and judgment. So it's working with somebody who is qualified in this area and is able to provide them a safe environment, face to face, where they can then work through some of the issues which trigger them to become addicted. And it may mean looking back at things in their past, going through some painful and hurtful memories and experiences, but being able to look forward to see how those things can be changed and then help them work towards a period of recovery. And you know, when somebody is an addict, they're an addict for life.
Okay.
You know? It's not something that you leave and then it's gone, but it's being able to tackle these things with a professional.
Okay, Julie, thank you very much indeed for sharing your expertise this morning. Have a good day and keep safe. Thank you so much indeed. Now, our hashtag New Normal has been busy. You've been speaking. Let's see what you've been saying to us this morning. The question we asked you was, do you have any addiction, or do you know someone who is struggling with addiction, whether alcohol, drugs related, work, food, sex, etc.? And how are you coping, or how are they coping? Here are some of your comments. We've got one from Danfield. Well, combining breakfast with lunch or lunch with supper, watching series, sleeping a lot, and now my house is turned to different functions as gym, cinema for one, also a hotel. So that's what you're getting addicted to in this COVID-19 season. Other comments, we've got someone else here. This is Mariana Lavard. Well, I'm shy. Can't state my addiction because I'm going to get lots of help from strangers. Thank you for sharing and wish you the best with getting help. Mkenya Kamili, I'm struggling with Facebook addiction. I need help. Yes, we'll touch on that, other behavioral addictions. And then Rani says, I'm addicted to my phone, social media to be precise, but lately I've been reading books to pass time, to try to stay away from it, but still, I log in thrice a week, which in my case is a good start. Good luck with that. Thanks for sharing. Leah Peter, well, which soap is coming soon at 6 p.m.? I'm addicted to them, to soap operas. I better find another way of being addicted. I can, have many holes as a sieve. Okay, thank you, Peter, for that. This is Cynthia Mideva. I'm addicted to food. Times are hard. Having 1 meal in a day is not easy. People, I tell you. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Cynthia, for that. And we'll take a short break. We'll be right back with more on addiction and COVID-19.